What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to Ideal Offseason. This is the series where I get to put the GM cap on for a little bit and help an NBA team navigate through their offseason. We try to make this series as realistic as possible, so we're not just throwing like LeBron on any team or Paul George or something like that and being like, look, they're so much better now. No, we're trying to make this realistic. We're trying to have some logic behind it. We're also trying to keep in mind like the team's real life position. If we're rebuilding the San Antonio Spurs, obviously they're not going to win a championship next year. We're trying to just make them marginally better so that they can continue to improve on the young core that they've built. But if we've got a team like the Los Angeles Lakers where they're trying to win a championship, well, obviously that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help them contend. And in this video, we got the Sacramento Kings, who are kind of scarily in the middle right now. And these are my least favorite teams to try and rebuild because it's so hard to pick a direction and fan bases are always torn between this stuff. But hey, this is my most popular series on YouTube, so make sure you guys keep showing the love and support. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, comment. I've responded to every single comment on my YouTube channel up to this point, and I intend to keep on doing so. I love having the conversations with you guys, so let's keep it going. And one other final thing, I know I'm bogging you guys with a lot right now. I am traveling throughout the week that you guys see this. I did get hired by an NBA team. I know, congrats. I'm going to be basically doing real life Ideal offseason. I'm going to be helping them with like their roster management and scouting and things like that. I'm just on a contract for the offseason, so it helps me kind of manage my work-life balance. That's why I left the NBA originally. And so, yeah, just know that that's happening. I'm pre-recording these videos that you're seeing now. So if something's happened between now and then, well, then tough shit. Just deal with it, all right? But anyway, we're back here on the Ideal offseason spreadsheet. Those of you guys who have been watching the series, you guys know what I'm about to say. This is a little spreadsheet that I've been using to kind of help demonstrate my vision for this series and everything. There's been a lot of you guys that want the spreadsheet, especially on that Minnesota Timberwolves video. Holy cow, did a lot of you want it. If you guys want access to the spreadsheet, all you have to do is leave me a comment saying like, hey, I would like the spreadsheet. Pretty easy to do. I will drop you a Discord link. You can join my Discord. This is good for my marketing and everything. So are the comments. That's why I'm doing it this way. It's all a marketing scheme. You're correct. But once you get on the Discord, shoot me a DM there, and I'll just give you the sheet right there. Pretty simple. I've given it to over 100 people so far. Have some fun with it. Message me what you guys do on it. I want to hear your thoughts and everything. But anyway, the Sacramento Kings. A year prior, they were what? Were they a 3 seed going into the playoffs? And we were like, wow, this team's really starting to figure it out. De'Aaron Fox is looking really good. Sabonis looks really good with them. And not that they didn't this year. It was a really competitive West this year, and they kind of got knocked out in the play-in. And now they're left with all these decisions, right? They're like, okay, like, how do we make this team better? Because we're already in the luxury tax space. It's not like we're going to be able to go out and sign some big name free agent. So how do we package some of these bigger contracts that we got going on over here into something? And that's what I'm going to try to figure out today. I'm going to let you guys know I'm trying to make this Kings team more competitive. I think you've got enough prime left in Sabonis, certainly in Fox, and you've got a young budding star in Keegan Murray that I think are really, really interesting. So let's start diving into it and figure out how we can make these Kings better. Alrighty, y'all, let's get into the nitty-gritty details. So we're out of cap space. We are in the luxury tax range now, which means that we can't go out and offer anybody that we don't have like bird rights to anything more than like a minimum contract. We're not in any of the aprons yet, so we're not restricted in like how we're doing our trades and anything yet, which is very valuable because we're going to probably try to make a couple of trades, and this is kind of going to be more of a retooling, trying to retool this team a little bit to try to bring them some improvement. We've got a couple draft picks this year. We got the 13th pick that we can hopefully use on an impact player. I've certainly got a couple dudes in mind, and we may even end up like doing the draft after like a trade and then doing some trades afterwards, depending on like the guys we get or whatever. I think that could be a really interesting way to go about it, but we'll end up seeing. I do plan on using both of these picks. The 13th pick, one, just because we can get a valuable player out of it, unless I see that there's like a great reason to go out and get some other stud player, but I just don't think that that guy's probably available in this free agency class, but that's kind of what I'm thinking for this. And the 45th pick, I just want to use as a cheap guy to fill out the back end of the roster so that we can try to avoid the first apron if possible. I don't know if that's going to be possible, but I'd like to try. So that's kind of what I'm thinking with these. Let's go over to the players. Obviously, Sabonis, he's got his big contract, very deserving. Same with Fox. Harrison Barnes kind of had a bit of a down season. It seems like he always does that after he gets a new contract, doesn't he? And then he picks it up right when he needs to get like a new contract again. But he was really good in the playoffs. I think he's just at that point in his career. Overall, if you look at like his season numbers, because I was just taking a look at these and refamiliarizing myself with them, still got you 12 points a game last year on pretty solid shooting, and like his plus minus numbers were fine. Like defensively, he still had really good numbers. So like I don't know if we're going to move Harrison Barnes just because it's hard to find wings that are this quality, but just something I want to bring up and touch on a little bit is Harrison Barnes. Let's look at Kevin Huerter. Kevin Huerter had a pretty rough season for them. Normally you'd see Kevin Huerter in this starting 2 spot right there for him because he was pretty good in his first season with them. Last year he was pretty rough, and he seems like the obvious guy, and we'll talk about why, to move right now because he's got a pretty good size contract, and there's guys currently beating him out in the rotation, so we'll look to do something like that. Keegan Murray, I think, is a budding young star, and I want to see the Sacramento Kings give him more ball handling responsibilities because I think he could do just that. We saw in the playoffs, like, he was really good with the ball and creating some stuff, so I hope we continue to see him develop. He's already a really good shooter, a nice defender. Let's make sure we continue to prioritize making Keegan Murray the 3rd star on this team. He also has a team option. Surprise, surprise, I'm going to be picking that up. Trey Lyles, a.k.a. the definition of a 78 overall in NBA 2K. Really just quality basketball player. Very solid at everything he does. I'd really like to keep Trey Lyles around if at all possible. Solid 3-point shooter, solid rebounder, can put the ball on the floor a little bit if he needed to. Just smart, nice basketball player. Like him. Sasha Venzakov, a guy that they brought in, technically a rookie last year out of Russia. Is he Russian? I think he is. Pretty good 3-point shooter. Doesn't do a whole ton else. Could be a guy that we package into a deal here as well. He's certainly not untouchable. Davion Mitchell came into the league really solid, and we were like, yeah, this guy's going to be a nice like defensive backup point guard for them, and he just kind of steadily got worse. But then the playoffs happened, and more so like the last like 2 months of the season happened, and he just like exploded onto the scene again. And so I don't want to trade Davion Mitchell, but he's going to be a very valuable chip, and this might be the most valuable that he gets. And if we're trying to avoid having to pay this guy or something, he might be something that someone that we have to include in a trade. I'm picking up his team option regardless. We certainly want him back. Chris Duarte, another young guy that showed a lot of promise right when he got into the NBA with the Pacers. Pretty down year last year, I'm not going to lie. Am I all that interested in picking up his option? Just out of curiosity to show you guys, if we take Duarte out, we don't even get ourselves back into the cap space. So for that reason alone, I'm probably going to keep him as possibly like another trade package guy. I'm going to pick up his option. So just know that we're doing that for the time being. And then we got Colby Jones, who's kind of just out there right now. I mean, we've got him as a very cheap contract for years to come. So that's cool. We'll probably just let him keep developing unless we need him in a trade for whatever reason. And then we got Keon Ellis, cheapest guy on the roster right now. I think he actually just has like less incentives than Kobe, and that's why he's technically like cheaper or something. And Keon Ellis is right here, the starting shooting guard, exploded onto the scene for them. Elite defender right away, and was hitting the 3 ball, played with a ton of energy. We want Keon Ellis on this team going forward, most likely going to be the starting shooting guard. Now, there's obviously a big player missing here, and that is, if you look at the Kings free agency, that's Malik Monk. Let's just talk about Malik Monk right now and get it out of the way. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Malik Monk ended up back on the Sacramento Kings next year. It's a very complicated thing because of the rules and how they're set up. In essence, they can only offer Malik Monk, it's something like $10-11 million a year or something like that for 4 years because they don't have like his complete bird rights or something like that. Because yeah, he was only on a 2-year contract, so they can't offer him more than like, it's like 120% of like his last contract value or something like that. So like a lot of people know, Malik Monk's a very good basketball player. He could go and get a $100 million contract from some other teams. Very well could do that. Not saying it couldn't happen at all. But there's also the sense that Malik Monk could just take like a 1-year, like $9-10 million contract from the team this year. They talk him into it because he seems to really like playing in Sacramento. I know him and Fox are really tight, and they say like, hey, like, you got to bank on yourself this year, and then we can give you a huge contract, right? Because then I think they can offer him like a 4 or 5 year deal or something like that, and it could be even bigger. So it's like, oh, does he bank on it? I don't know. I'm sure Kings fans want to say that that's true, and honestly, like, if I had to put money on it, I might say that would happen because it just seems like he might bank on himself a little bit. But for the sense of realism, man, like, I don't know. I have such a hard time saying that he's going to turn down $100 million because somebody's going to offer it to him. And everyone thinks it's the Orlando Magic. I don't think he's going to go to the Orlando Magic personally. That's just from things that I've heard or whatever. But, you know, you never know. They throw a good chunk of change at him. Maybe he just says, fuck it, I'm on my way there right now to Orlando to get that tax-free money and everything. But, like, I don't know. I think we're going to have to say that we're probably losing Malik Monk in this just because, like, I know if someone offered me $100K, man, to not hang out with my friend every day or $100 million, like, my friend's going to have to understand. So let's operate under the idea that we're not getting Malik Monk back, right? We've got 4 roster spots left. We know we have 2 draft picks to use, and we want to trade some of these guys. I want to start exploring the trade market now so that we have a good idea with the 13th pick, because we're going to have some options with the 13th pick, what we can do with it. So without further ado, we're on our way to Fanspo. For those of you that don't know, this is Fanspo. It's a really cool basketball social media page that has all these really in-depth tools to help us keep this series realistic, and one of them is this trade machine right here. And you'll see these are kind of the trending names that are trying to be traded right now, and that's kind of a cool thing to look at the end of the day. And so the first thing I want to do is try to figure out how we can trade Kevin Huerter here. So honestly, what I could do is I could go to posts and see what other ideas people have for inspiration and stuff like that, but I don't really feel the need to do that. I've got a couple ideas I want to explore. So here's what I'm kind of thinking. So let's grab us some Sacramento Kings first. Here's the team that I think it makes a lot of sense to move Kevin Huerter to, and that's the Portland Trail Blazers. For those of you that don't know, I've talked about this a lot. It really annoyed me what the Portland Trail Blazers did with Scoot Henderson this year. I hate when teams draft these young, especially point guards onto their teams, and they thrust them out there and they're like, okay, yeah, go be good now. And they just this team was horrible for Scoot Henderson. It didn't make any sense for him to play with any of these dudes. They had all these extra ball handlers on the team and nobody that could space the floor, and their bigs were in the way. I just don't think it made a ton of sense. So I think that the Trailblazers are going to be interested in adding some guys that make sense to play next to Scoot Henderson. Kevin Huerter ideally is one of those dudes. Obviously, his shooting wasn't great this last season, but he's traditionally been a pretty solid 3-and-D player in the NBA. That's why he got the contract that he got. So I'd like to explore how we can actually make that happen. So obviously it starts out with Kevin Huerter moving over there. And the players that I'm interested in are actually kind of a wide variety. I'm interested in a Robert Williams for one of them, and I'm interested in a Malcolm Brogdon. I think Malcolm Brogdon being a nice bench or backup point guard player for us would add a lot to our team, right? Just having a very stable basketball player, although Malcolm Brogdon apparently wants to stay in Portland. Fair enough, then maybe I target a Rob Will or something like that. But then we probably got to package some more people to make that actually happen. So maybe we start out with that. Maybe we start off with looking at what a Rob Will trade looks like here. And so let me just try this trade. I presume this works. Yep, it doesn't technically work because the Portland Trailblazers are our first apron team right now, and they could relinquish some cap holds and stuff like that of some of these guys, and they'd probably be just fine, honestly. But I think that we're going to have to do a little bit more to kind of make this trade make some sense. So what happens if we do something like this? Let's say we want to take back a Matisse Thybulle as well, someone that's a very interesting player, started to develop his three-point shot a little bit, but still didn't have a lot of gravity behind it, always a really good defensive player. But the Portland Trailblazers also have a lot of other young wings that they're trying to develop on this team, and so maybe that they're willing to give him up because of that, and they just don't really want to pay him these last 2 years or whatever, because again, he's just not the ideal fit next to Scoot Henderson at the end of the day, so maybe they're willing to give him up as well. So what are we going to give up then in a trade to kind of make this happen? I think we look at a guy like a Sasha Venzikov, right? I think the contract amount is pretty appropriate. Again, gives them another shooter to kind of space the floor and stuff like that. But obviously this trade is not just worth it to them for that reason alone. They're probably going to want some picks in order to make this happen. And I'm honestly willing to throw some sort of offer at them to make that happen. Now, for Robert Williams, at one point, he was probably worth a first-round pick or whatever. I don't necessarily think that's the case anymore because he's been so injured. But you look at Matisse Thybulle, and he's a pretty solid player in a loan. So if you threw in one first-round pick, that might be worth it. What does kind of their draft situation look like? They've got plenty of picks going into this draft, and it's not a great draft class, so you're probably not too worried about it. I think what you start off with is giving them their own second-round pick back for next year. This is actually the only non-Sacramento Kings pick that they have going forward. This is probably going to be a solid pick, presuming they're not going to be very good again next year. So I think you give that back to them because that could be a borderline or a very high second round pick. So basically a late first round pick. I think you give that back to them. After that, do we just throw in one more second round pick and then call it good? Where are they missing another second round pick? Is there anywhere else that we could kind of fill in a gap for them? They don't have a 2029 second round pick. So let's just say we're throwing them our 2029 pick. Who knows how good we are at this point. And honestly, as simple as this trade seems, I think that this is relatively fair for the most part. They get a little bit of draft capital, right? But they also just get a better fit of players, right? And they're actually saving money on this move, right? Because what happens here? The Portland Trailblazers, we pick up, it's really not that big of a difference. Do we maybe take like another contract off their hands or something? Nah, I'm not really sure who that would be. I don't think this is like the craziest trade in the world, honestly. Give them a couple of seconds. I don't really see Rob Will being a huge part of their team. You could probably make a case that we should throw in like a first round pick for Rob Will, but like, I don't know. I feel like a second round pick is honestly enough, and you just get some better players around Scoot Henderson at the end of the day. Okay, I started fiddling with things a little more. We've brought a third team into this deal. We brought the Brooklyn Nets in, and here's exactly why. I think Dorian Finney-Smith is a much more interesting player to them that can help them. I know the Trailblazers aren't necessarily trying to win right now, but I think it makes some sense for them to try to just bring in some better talents around Scoot Henderson, because they're going to want to start to figure out if he's a guy that can actually do something, right? Because that's going to help them pick a direction. I think if you bring some actual, like, solid NBA players around him, you're going to be okay. It's like you were locked into the contract duration already, so I think that that's honestly totally fine. We rerouted Venzikov over to the Nets, and what we ended up doing is we gave them, where did that draft pick go? We ended up giving them the 34th pick in this draft, which is pretty high in the second round. The Trailblazers don't need that many picks in this one, and the Nets have no picks in it. So I know that they turned down all that stuff for Dorian Finney-Smith before, but this might be the best that they can actually get for him. Maybe you could say that they could give him like one more second or something, since we're routing a couple second round picks to them already, and they really don't need all the second round picks that they have. Nah, I think this move is honestly fine how it is. I know it's a little bit complicated to look at, so let's just kind of break this down really quick. We get two players that are probably going to add a little bit of depth to us and hopefully fit our team just a little bit better, right? We get a really valuable backup center, which is really, really interesting to look at. We also get a nice another defender to add to this team, which is good. Hopefully we continue to build on his three-point shooting. If not, then you could run into space issues, but I'd rather try it with Thibault. The Portland Trailblazers get two players that should fit around Scoot Henderson pretty well, in theory, right? They're paying a little bit more in salary, but that's okay, right? They're getting some draft picks back as well, which is totally fine because they're giving up some young guys. And then they also moved one pick over to the Brooklyn Nets to help them get in the draft this year. The Nets save a shit ton of money that they can use because they're ideally trying to bring in another star this offseason through some of their trades. So this helps them kind of get out of some of the cap hell that they could be in. So I think that this makes like a decent amount of sense for both of these teams. It's probably not the best trade that we've ever concocted, but I like the bones of it. So I think that we're going to try this trade, make sure it works. Yep, all the rules work and everything. I'm kind of curious, actually. They actually say the Kings would get worse, the Trailblazers would get better, which, yeah, that's pretty easy to assume. The Nets get a little bit worse, but they bring in a lot more money, which is good. We actually save a little bit of money as well. So we're going to say that this is how we operated for this one. So Venzikov is off the roster. Kevin Huerter's off the roster. This now becomes Robert Williams right here, and this becomes Matisse Thybulle. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Where were those guys? So let's take him off here. Let's take Venzikov off here. We're going to move Duarte down, and we're going to assume that Matisse Thybulle would fit in here. We'll slide Colby Jones up one. We'll have to solidify a better shooting guard going forward. And then we have Robert Williams to now play backup center. Hopefully he's healthy, because if he's healthy, he's a phenomenal defensive player and probably a better rim defender that we just haven't had in Sacramento for a while. So have we gotten a little bit better? Yes, we've also saved a little bit of money. We also lost this pick and we lost this pick, but honestly, not too concerned about it. Now, this is where I want to take a look at Chris Duarte and Davion Mitchell. I'm not sure I want to keep these guys past this season because I'm not sure I'm going to be bringing them back. And just out of curiosity, how much money are we working with if we try to move both of these guys? About $12 million. Okay, that's not the worst thing in the world. I can live with that. So let's try, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to go over to Basketball Reference. This is something that I do a lot just to kind of look at the players that I can financially afford in this. We're going to look in like the $12 million range and see if there's a player out there that makes some sense for us to target, that if we combine those two guys and maybe some picks or something, we can try to get some better players. What about Luke Kennard here? So the reason we had Kevin Huerter on the team was to be somewhat of a Luke Kennard on the team, be a really good spacer that we could put next to De'Aaron Fox at times. He's not a very good defender. At least Kevin Huerter was pretty solid at that. But I think this might be a better use of the two contracts, in all honesty. And the reason I feel okay about that is because I feel like we could like go out there and we could find another Davion Mitchell. There's a particular player I'd like to draft with this. So let's start concocting how we can make that trade happen. And so I'm just going to bring a fourth team in here because I don't think there's a way to like save like the conditions of something on Fanspo. So we're just going to bring the Grizzlies into this and kind of build off of it a little bit. So let's say that I want to go down to Chris Duarte here. We'd be trading him to the Grizzlies. Davion Mitchell would be on his way to the Grizzlies. And we took back Luke Kennard. We're trading him to the Kings. I just want to make sure that like the money makes sense the way I think of it. Yep. So that makes sense the way that I think about it already. Do I need to do anything else in this trade, really? Because here's the logic from the Grizzlies' end, right? Luke Kennard's probably somebody that they're going to look to move this offseason anyway. If not, they might not even pick up his team option just because they're trying to clear up as much cap space as possible to make as many moves as possible. They've made that very clear for this offseason, right? So we take Kennard off their hands and we turn it into two more team options that they could also flip in trades because these are a little more dynamic of contracts, right? Maybe they're not as valuable. Well, Davion Mitchell might be, but maybe they're not quite as valuable as a Luke Kennard, but now you've turned one contract into a couple. You've increased your cap space a little bit, and both of these players could be cheaper options to throw on your bench this year. Whereas we get just a better player for what we need right now in a Luke Kennard. So I don't really think we need to do anything else for them. We're giving them kind of the young dudes in this, so I'm okay with this. We're trying to build a more win now and depth-oriented team, so let's bring Luke Kennard in. So we moved off of Mitchell and Duarte, and we have brought in Luke Kennard. And I know that this is kind of one of the weirder ideal off seasons that I've done up to this point, and if I have to timestamp this moment, I will. And I'm sure you guys are wondering, like, why haven't you guys tried to make a Zach LaVine trade yet or something like that? I don't think Zach LaVine fits on this team, man. Like, I don't really think that he does. I haven't seen him play, like, good off-ball basketball, like, ever in my time with the Bulls, so I don't think he fits into this hub system that they're running, and he's going to take the ball away from Keegan a little bit more. So what I want to do is just move Kennard here, and I just want to build this team up with an idea that they've got a little bit more of a dynamic around like Fox, Keegan Murray, and Sabonis as the main offensive players. Like try to get a bunch of versatile defenders to kind of be around these guys and just let these three kind of be your primary scorers. Because I feel like you can make it happen. And when I say make it happen, be really competitive in the playoffs by doing this. So I feel pretty good about where we're at with this. We've got some decent depth on the team now. Ooh, Davion Mitchell is no longer there. So we need to address the point guard. I'm going to try to do that in the draft. We got Luke Kennard coming off the bench now as a really, really, really good shooter, which is just important to have on a team with De'Aaron Fox. You got Harrison Barnes still. You got Matisse Thybulle. That's there. You got Keegan Murray, Trey Lyles we feel good about. We've got Robert Williams, which hopefully is a good bench player for us, and hopefully he stays healthy. And we got Domas still. Let's go into the draft. So this is the Fanspo mock draft simulator. I think it's a pretty cool little tool that adds a sense of realism to the series, because otherwise I'd be like, I think this guy's going to be available here, so I'm going to pick him with this pick. That just doesn't make a ton of sense to me. At least this has like some AI components that kind of take into account all the different players that could be available with these picks, and they try to put them in a spot that makes some sense, right? And so with this, we can add a sense of realism to everything. Who do we have available here? Ron Holland is available, which is someone that could realistically fall to 13. I think that's really, really interesting. We're going to talk about all these guys. Zach Edey, obviously, probably don't need a center in this, but Zach Edey, maybe he rises up the draft boards to this point. I don't personally think so. Tajon Salon is how I've been told his name is pronounced. If I'm wrong, please let me know, because I'd like to pronounce his name correctly. A lot of potential in this guy. One of the guys with the higher ceilings in this draft class, 6'10", 207, really, really good. French Giannis is kind of an interesting way of comparing him. Very, very athletic, has shown a pretty solid shooting stroke and everything. Very mobile, has shown some decent passing skills, but he's been very hot and cold, and I believe he's the youngest player in this draft class, so probably just needs a little time to develop, but looks like he's like pretty NBA like body ready for the most part. Like body ready isn't like the perfect way to describe it, but he doesn't look like he's just going to be like out muscled in the NBA completely. So I think he's interesting. I don't think he's exactly what we need because we've got Keegan in this spot. This is who I was hoping was available for us, and that's Devin Carter. Devin Carter, a little bit more older, a little bit a more experienced player. I think you're going to see Devin Carter rise in a lot of people's like mock drafts and stuff like that. And honestly, like I've seen it happen already, because as you see some of these other younger guys that have, we'll call a high bust potential in the NBA come through, I think Devin Carter is one of those guys that you look at and you're like, yeah, this guy's going to be able to contribute for an NBA team right away. He's just going to be solid, even if his ceiling isn't very high. What do we see from him at Providence this last season? Some really good scoring, some incredible rebounding from the point guard spot for a guy that's like 6'2", 6'3". He's got some solid weight on him. Shot the three ball well. Nice ball handler. Really good defender. Replaces Davion Mitchell. You guys see where I'm going with this. I just think this makes more sense. We're kind of resetting Davion Mitchell's contract in a way by doing this, so I'm not going to overthink this. I'm just going to take Devin Carter. Devin Carter goes there. He would make this much money. We'd get him for 4 seasons. He slides in as a guy that can immediately help us at the backup point guard spot. We now have a solid 10-man rotation on the team that I feel pretty dang good about. And you know, these trades are difficult to kind of digest and everything. There's a lot going on with them, but I truly do think, like, looking at those trades, like, I think there's benefit to each team with this. Like, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on those moves and everything, but I like how this team is coming together so far. There's depth around it. You're banking a little bit on Keegan Murray getting better, but this is like a very, very like deep, and we're seeing how important that is in the playoffs right now, right? Like, this is a deep and versatile NBA basketball team. So let's use our next pick in the draft now and see what we can find with it. All right, so we're approaching our pick here, and I think something to look at with this is we could really go either way with it. We could look at this either as like we could take somebody with a lot of potential here because we've got a lot of guys that are going to be able to play right now, or we could just say let's continue to bolster our bench with like playoff like ready guys or whatever. But I actually see kind of who I want to take with this already, and it's Pacome Dead Yet. You guys tell me again if I'm saying this wrong. Another French guy. I don't speak French. Just leave me alone. Actually, somebody we took with a similar pick with the Minnesota Timberwolves ideal offseason. And here's why I like this guy. 6'9", shoots the shit out of the basketball already. Pretty smart player. Can put the ball on the floor a little bit. Very solid athlete. He's just kind of raw and young right now and probably needs to grow in some of his intangibles and stuff. Like, still makes a lot of like young guy mistakes and everything. But at 6'9" and a guy that could really shoot that well, I think he makes a lot of sense as a future like role player on this team that could come in and play next to Fox and like Sabonis and those guys as like off-ball players in the hub offense that they run. So I like the idea of taking a guy that we can put a little bit of development time into. He could play the 2 or the 3 most likely. So I feel pretty good about taking the guy Pacome here and just kind of letting him grow on the bench a little bit. So Pacome, Dead Yet, he would be making about this much money for 2 seasons. We could throw him, let's throw him here. Why not? He can be the reserve 3 for us. So that leaves us with 3 roster spots left going into free agency. Nobody else that I really want to trade or anything on this team. I feel pretty good with things as they are. We lost this draft pick now because we used it, so we can move these up in here. So what do we need to address here? We really just need to address like reserves here, like maybe finding like another like mature point guard that we could put behind Fox and everything, as we are putting a lot of pressure on a rookie to be a backup point guard. That's just a lot to ask. So that's probably the first thing we address, and then we just try to go find some other length and stuff to have come off the bench. Also, important thing to note really quick that I'm just now seeing, we haven't entered the first apron yet, which is a huge deal, and it looks like we'll be avoiding it, right? We've got about $12 million still before we would run into that problem. This is a big deal for this team going into this season, right? Because we're kind of asking the team to experiment with this new group a little bit. It's not like the newest group, but it's kind of a new group, right? And here's the thing. We now have a lot of very tradable players and contracts on this team, like the Harrison Barnes, Robert Williams, Trey Lyles, Thibault, Kennard, all these dudes, right? If star player becomes available, we have 2 draft picks that we could trade. Well, actually, it'll be 3 because they have access to like the 2030 pick by now. And because we're not in the first apron, we can still combine players to go get big name player, right? So just keep that in mind. Like, this is ideal off season, right? So we're trying to set this team up for success going forward. This is why we wanted to keep them in the first apron. So if star player becomes available, we can go get star player. But anyway, back to point guards now. Just looking through really quick, like nobody that's going to stand out like crazy to me whatsoever. I think Monte Morris is a very interesting option. I'm sure he's going to want to go somewhere he could try to play to earn himself another decent contract. Again, I like Patrick Beverly a lot. I'd even consider Russell Westbrook, but I'd like to have somebody that could shoot a little bit. I think Jordan McLaughlin's an interesting option. I think what we're going to do, though, is we're going to target Cameron Payne. Cameron Payne's not a guy I'm like incredibly high on by any means, but he is like a guy that can start to go off at any given moment. And he's played enough NBA point guard in his career at this point to where he's not like a complete liability in turning the ball over and stuff. So I think Cameron Payne's going to be the first guy we look to bring off or put into our reserves. So Cameron Payne goes there. He would make about this much money. We get him for 1 season. We throw Cam Payne right there. Okay, very interesting. Next thing I want to do, just looking at kind of who we have available, I'd like another like shooting wing to bring off this team, because we got enough guys that can kind of play the 4 between like Barnes, Keegan, Lyles, stuff like that. So I'd like to find another shooting forward or wing for this team. So I wonder who that could be. I love the idea of like a Chetty Osman, because he's not like a revolving door defensively. He's a good enough shooter. I believe it was like 39% from 3. Didn't play a ton of minutes, so he's not going to get anything more than a minimum contract. I don't see why the Spurs would necessarily bring him back. I think he'll be on the market. We'll give him a minimum contract with the promise that like he can compete for a rotation spot on the team, right? So let's bring in Chetty Osman next. So Chetty Osman comes in, he gets that much money, 1 year. Let's just move our guy Pacome down here, and we move Chetty to there. Perfect. Another option. Let's go find just like one more big man that we can just give like a minimum contract to. Doesn't have to be anything all that crazy, just a guy with some size that wants to be on a minimum contract. We could bring JaVale McGee back, in all honesty. I'm really not upset with that thought at all, and he's been on the team already. He's a good vet. He's got championship experience and stuff. You know what? Let's bring JaVale McGee back. Why the hell not, right? I love that JaVale McGee's still in the NBA. So let's get us some JaVale McGee, and he gets the 10-year vet. So there we go. We throw JaVale back here for the Sacramento Kings, and this right here is your 2024-2025 Sacramento Kings. Is it the most exciting thing ever? No, probably not. Do we miss Malik Monk? Sure. And I want to stress, I do think that the Malik Monk thing could happen. I know that there's a good chance that he doesn't come back, and so I don't want to do this whole ideal offseason with him here. I know that would be ideal and everything, but let's explore the realm without it, right? Obviously, if we can get Malik Monk back and everything, that's really cool. That changes up how we do the trades and everything, but this is how I think we can do it without Malik Monk, right? I think this is a nice retooling of the roster. We gave up some small draft assets going forward and everything, but we didn't give up any first. We brought in some interesting young players to this team, like a Devin Carter, who should be able to contribute for us right away. We added some new depth to the team. Luke Kennard has been a phenomenal shooter his whole career. Should have a lot of space to operate on this team, right? We still got Harrison Barnes on the team. Hopefully Keon Ellis continues to get better. We brought in Matisse Thybulle, Chetty Osman. Again, guys that are just going to add a little bit more dynamicness to our bench, bring in an athlete and a defenseman and Thybulle that can hopefully continue to be a better shooter. I'm a little skeptical of it still, but that's just me. Chetty Osman, another shooter for the team. We still got Trey Lyles. Robert Williams will hopefully be a good rim defender for us. We could run into some defensive problems if Rob Will gets hurt and everything, but you know what? We're not in the first apron yet, so we could always chase the buyout market if we need to still. And I feel pretty solid about this. Where do I think this team can go? It's hard to say with how good the West is, man, and that's the hard thing with staying competitive, because if you don't have one of the top players to begin with, how far can you really go, right? But if Keegan Murray continues to develop into like a third really good offensive player, I think that this team could easily like really fight its way through the regular season back into a top 4 seed if they really wanted to, because Fox and Sabonis are really, really good basketball players. All depends on how they get going in the regular season. If they just have the depth, I think that they could go a long way. Also, shout out Mike Brown for getting his new contract and everything. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. I'm sure that you'd like to see a bigger name get traded here like a Zach LaVine, but I don't think that's what you guys really want. I feel like that's a Band-Aid, and that's not like an actual fix to a problem. So, but you guys let me know at the end of the day. I want to discuss it. Thanks so much. We'll talk later. Bye.